Now that December has started, Nvidia basically just flooded new GPUs onto the market. I'm going to give you some proof. Look at this stack of RTX 4090s that CyberPower got. Of course, they're going to be a systems integrator, but at least they have a whole lot of stock of 4090s. Not only that, yesterday we had some of the biggest drops I've ever seen for the RTX 4000. So here's a Best Buy drop. Look at that, 4080. You can actually add it to cart and it tells you you're in line as soon as you can do it. Now, the 4080 isn't the most popular GPU. Let's see if it's going to let me do it. Wow, I think it actually did. It actually went through. Look at that. Actually lets you check out. I'm not going to buy it. I'm just going to cancel it, but it lets you do it. This is funny because a few days ago, I made a video saying that GPUs were disappearing off of store shelves, specifically the high-end RTX 3000, stuff like the 3080 Ti. So yes, when I say stuff seems like it's selling out, that makes sense. We know that Nvidia has been holding a lot of RTX 3000 inventory because this year, for the last several months, the market was pretty much inundated with a lot of RTX 3000 that they couldn't sell for a while because the prices were coming down. But as prices continued to come down lower and lower, new stuff came out like the 4090, which is an entirely different product class. The RTX 3000 started to sell out because, retailers weren't getting too much stock, especially of certain GPUs. Remember, EVGA, which was one of the biggest sellers of like 3080 Ti's, 3090s, 3090 Ti's. I remember that anytime last year in 2021, if you were going to get a high-end GPU, there was a good chance it was EVGA in the US market. I realize they're not as big in Europe and in other countries throughout the world, but in the US market, which is quite large, EVGA was massive, and you guys know they're completely out of the picture, meaning that as soon as they sell out of their current inventory, we saw very, very little. I even remember Jay's 2 cents, who has more of a close personal relationship with them. He mentioned that the 3080 Ti seemed like it was going pretty fast. 3080 Ti is a very popular gaming GPU because it's one of the fastest of last generation without having to go overkill like the 3090. If you don't need all of those GBs of VRAM, of course, if you're like a content creator or something like that. So having said that, the RTX 3000 certainly is getting scarce. Looking at major retailers like Newegg, Amazon, even Micro Center, a lot of these GPUs have indeed disappeared because first, they have not been buying new inventory because they had so much on hand. So they stopped buying it. And then we go through major holidays, sale periods like, Black Friday. We go through different areas where they're doing a lot of promotions on the new CPUs. And then you could see with the absence of RTX 4000, how a lot of people will be like, oh, they might as well buy that 3080 Ti that's in stock because now the price is several $100s less than it used to be. Maybe the 3070s were less as well. So we ended up actually seeing a few in stock of like the mid-range and lower GPUs, stuff like 3060 Ti and 3070. You might be able to find a little bit easier now than something like a 3080 Ti or a 3090. 3090 Ti's have also been pretty difficult to get. You haven't really been seeing them at all ever since the pricing went down. The people that couldn't get an RTX 4000, a lot of them seemed pretty happy with getting a 3090 Ti for like $900 to $1,000 thereabouts after the price went down. So having said that, that's why it looks like Nvidia seems at least somewhat satisfied that a lot of inventory has been cleared. I know they probably still have a lot in their own inventory because we saw numbers from their quarterly earnings that show their inventory numbers are like double of last year. But at least with retail partners, at least searching online, you can't really see that many in stock. Like if you go to Newegg, there aren't really any 3080 Ti's at MSRP. You still have some overpriced ones being sold by certain sellers, but in terms of like retail, new MSRP type of GPUs at like the more discounted prices, we're not really seeing them too much. So that probably opens the way for Nvidia to release more RTX 4000, therefore not really worrying about damaging any type of RTX 3000 sales. Of course, they're going to have another incentive to do this because if we look at AMD's RDNA 3, that's going to be coming out this month in a few short weeks. So if Nvidia floods the market now, with GPUs, they can maybe throw AMD off their game because nobody knows what the stock and availability will be like for RDNA 3. And even though people are actually pretty excited for like the 7900 XTX, 7900 XT to a certain degree, it's hard to tell exactly how that's going to translate to when they actually come out. The pricing seems pretty good, at least off the bat for the MSRP of the base models. Performance looks promising. We haven't seen the real numbers yet. We really don't know how it's going to compare at the end of the day. And of course, Nvidia always wins out with the Nvidia people that really need certain things. Like if you really want ray tracing, you're going to have to go to the Nvidia side. Some people say it's not a big deal, so they may be happy with an AMD GPU. Some content creators and people who do like Blender, 3D work, you're definitely going to have a bigger advantage even with a slightly lower end Nvidia GPU than some of the higher end AMD stuff. Those are really geared for gaming, high refresh rate, maybe 1440p seems ideal, even though AMD, of course, aims for 4K with the 7900 XTX. Of course, that's going to be the highest end resolution that's reasonable. We know that especially 1440p, something like a 4090 can actually be bottlenecked by a lot of CPUs. So a GPU like AMD 7900 XT may actually be more than you need for a 1440p resolution. So you may actually have a lot of diminishing returns even if you go to a 4090. But having said that, that's definitely going to be one of the big reasons for Nvidia to want to let a lot of inventory of like the 4080 hit the shelves. Now, this is definitely the holiday season now where a lot of computer parts get sold. The 4080 still has a pretty major problem. This is going to be a little bit funny now. To some people, the 4080 is sold out. To other people, it's in stock a lot. Let me tell you what I mean. For example, depending on the country that you're in, you may actually see 4090s in stock all day, but at high prices that nobody wants to pay. In the US, at least, the 4090 has been very difficult to come by. In fact, the recent drop that we had yesterday was the first time that we saw 4090s actually come in stock, at least for a little bit, after a long time not having any Best Buy drops. The 4080 in America, some people say I can't find them anywhere, and sometimes it's true. If you search on Newegg, you really couldn't see one depending on the time that you search. But for example, on launch day, they stayed up for a considerable amount of time for a lot of people to be able to see throughout the United States. And then yesterday, when they had the drop, the 4080 was actually in stock for multiple hours. I mean, I saw it myself. First, there was the Best Buy drop where they had Founders Edition. Even that was up for a very long time. And they even had the Strix 4080, which is one of the more popular ones, even though it's the most expensive one. People just like the Strix. What do you want me to say? That's just how it is. And then they had them for several hours. Not only Best Buy, but then you checked Newegg, they also had a drop the same day, which is part of why I'm making this video, making the conclusion that Nvidia is really flooding the markets, especially with 4080s. Some 4090s, I wouldn't call the 4090 flooding the market, but they did let some more stock come through. So the 4080s, they definitely let a lot of stock through because first, not as many people do want to buy them because it's not really a popular GPU, especially not this close to the AMD release. But at the end of the day, if somebody sees a 4080 and they've been itching for a new GPU, even though it's not the best price to performance, they may end up getting it just because it's the only high-end thing available. If you can't find a 3090 Ti or a 3080 Ti for a lot cheaper, like I said before, they're getting harder to find. And then you can't find a 4090 generally, and those are much more expensive. If you want anything that's like a high-end GPU, the 4080 is really the only thing out right now that's going to be like next generation, and you can actually find it. That is until AMD comes out with their GPUs. So Nvidia is definitely taking advantage of this little spacing in the market right now to try to just shoehorn in as many 4080s as they can get. Most people that are savvy, you know the 4080 is not the best bang for the buck, but anytime you get a wider scope and availability like this for a GPU like the 4080, it's still going to catch a lot of sales. That's just the truth of it. Gamers that don't want to wait anymore, content creators, it's a great deal for them actually because the 4080 does perform well in the traditional content creator type of applications, 3D work, video rendering. It's a fantastic GPU in those cases. It may not make the most sense for power to performance to value like gamers really want, like the 3080 did. That was a perfect GPU at $699. mind, this is not that. This is much different, but some people are going to be pushed to the wall. And when it comes available, like it has during the last few days, people are going to tend to want to go buy it if they can't find anything else. So Nvidia's strategy to sort of flood the market before the AMD launch definitely makes a lot of sense. I'm not too sure how much Nvidia is actually worried about AMD, because at the end of the day, they have a tremendous advantage in market share. We even talked about recently, Q3, Nvidia had a stunning 88% of GPU sold, while AMD had just 8% and Intel 4%. Now, to be clear, these are the GPUs sold in Q3, which there are a lot of factors here. I mean, Nvidia did release some new stuff like the 4090. Nvidia has more GPUs out on the market, and AMD has not had any refreshes during that period. Their first GPU out in a long time, actually, it will be the RDNA 3 that's coming out this month. So a lot of factors for that. Doesn't take away the fact that Nvidia still has a very commanding market share, very commanding lead, even when you take into account everybody's GPU in totality that are out on the market playing games, doing content creation. Nvidia definitely has that to their advantage. So hard to say how much they really care about AMD, but they definitely do. I mean, AMD definitely cares about Nvidia. They're always making these, snarky remarks towards like stuff like the 4090. If you guys watched the presentation for the 7900 XT, they made a lot of comments that are like underhanded jabs at Nvidia. They talked about the power connector not melting on the AMD GPUs. They talked about the size of the GPU. They definitely are very aware of the presence of Nvidia. Typically, Nvidia won't really mention AMD nearly as much because after all, they're the one on top. They're the one sort of leading the way, at least the way things have been going lately. So in my opinion, to finish off the year, in like the 2 weeks before the AMD GPUs release, Nvidia is definitely pumping out more 4080s on the market, hoping that they sell, take away some of more market share from people that may eventually go towards AMD. And they definitely were seeing a lot less RTX 3000 high-end GPUs on the shelves and on Newegg and different places you may typically buy a GPU. But this doesn't mean that there aren't a tremendous amount on the used market. That's an area that you guys can't forget. I know some people don't like buying used GPUs, but at the end of the day, that's where you're going to get the best value. For example, you can probably pick up like a 3080 Founders Edition with a box for around maybe $550. Try to find a retail 3080, even if it's a 10 gigabyte one, might be hard to find one for under $700 if you even do. So you can definitely save a lot of money, and as long as the GPU was, taken care of, typically you'll be okay. But anyway, this was definitely the biggest drop we've seen in a while, and I'm curious to see what's going to happen near the AMD launch. Nvidia may drop even more GPUs, including 4090s, in order to take away some of the thunder from AMD's release. All right, guys, so remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.